The Second New Deal by Kristen McGovern and Lydia Sydnor. The Second New Deal is the second stage of the New Deal programs of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which started in 1933 and parts of it is still in act today.
Our thesis statement is, although the first New Deal helped America during the Great Depression for a brief time, the Second New Deal had a positive, lasting effect on America by legislation like the Wagner Act and Social Security Act. After the New Deal, despite the best efforts of President Roosevelt and his cabinet, however, the Great Depression continued, unemployment persisted, and people grew angry and more desperate. So in the spring of 1935, Roosevelt launched a second, more aggressive series of federal programs known as the Second New Deal. FDR addressed Congress with three major goals of improvement for America. One was the improvement use of national resources. The second was security against old age, unemployment, and illnesses. The third was a national welfare program to replace state relief efforts. The Second New Deal included programs to redistribute wealth, income, and power to the poor and workers that the New Deal had not accomplished. The most important programs were the Social Security Act and the Wagner Act.
The Social Security Act is part of the Second New Deal. It was an attempt to limit what was seen as danger in the modern American life, including old age, poverty, unemployment, and the burdens of widows and fatherless children. This act was signed on August 14, 1935. It was signed when President Roosevelt became the first president to advocate federal assistance for the elderly. The act provided benefits to the retirees and the unemployed and a lump sum benefit at death. Payments to current retirees are financed by a payroll tax on current workers' wages, half directly as a payroll tax and half paid by the employer. The act also gave money to the states to provide assistance to aged individuals, for unemployment insurance, aid to families with dependent children, maternal and child welfare, and public health services to the blind. There are 11 titles to the Social Security Act. Title I, Grants to States for Old Age Assistance. Title II, Federal Old Age Benefits. Title III, Grants to States for Unemployment Compensation Administration. Title IV, Grant to States for Aid to Dependent Children. Title V, Grants to States for Maternal and Child Welfare. Title VI, Public Health Work. Title VII, Social Security Board. Title VIII, Taxes with respect to employment. Title IX, Tax on employers of 8 or more. Title X, Grants to States for Aid to the Blind, and Title XI, General Provisions.
The Wagner Act is also known as the National Labor Relations Act. They created the National Labor Relations Board to supervise union elections and prevent businesses from treating their workers unfairly. Senator Robert F. Wagner, a Democrat from New York, introduced the legislation in 1935 when the United States was in the midst of the Great Depression. Franklin D. Roosevelt initially opposed the legislation out of fear that labor organizing might interfere with economic recovery, but gave his support when passage became inevitable. The Wagner Act established the rights of employees to organize, join, or aid labor unions and to participate in collective bargaining through their representatives. The act also authorized unions to make concerted actions for those purposes. This meant that workers could lawfully strike and take the other peaceful action in a way of placing pressure on an employer.
In April, he created the Works Progress Administration to provide jobs for the unemployed people. The WPA projects weren't allowed to compete with private industry, so they focused on building things like post offices, bridges, schools, highways, and parks. The WPA also gave work to artists, writers, theater directors, and musicians. Roosevelt's vision of a work relief program employed more than 8.5 million people. Under the direction of Harry Hopkins, an enthusiast ex-social worker who had come from modest means, the WPA would spend more than $11 million in employment relief before it was canceled in 1943. The work relief program was more expensive than direct relief payments, but worth the added cost, Hopkins believed.